And welcome back to Court TV Live. Happy Friday. I'm Kelly Craft in for Ted Rollins today. And we are in Miami, Florida this afternoon for the toxic relationship murder trial. This is for Daisy Link, the 30-year-old who made headlines last year for becoming pregnant while in jail. She is charged with second-degree murder in the death of her on-again, off-again boyfriend. Prosecutors say Link shot Pedro Jimenez in the leg back in June of 2022. Took place in an alleyway outside the couple's home. The defense says that Link shot, though, in self-defense. Let's get you back to the courtroom now. The medical examiner has taken the stand.
Yes, Judge. Good morning. Can you please state your name for the record?
Good morning. I'm Dr. Benjamin Mathis.
Mr. Mathis, what do you do for a living?
I am the Chief Medical Examiner of the Miami-Dade County Medical Examiner Department.
And how long have you been the Chief Medical Examiner?
10 days. Last week they promoted me to Chief Medical Examiner. I've been Deputy Chief for the prior 3 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you mentioned you've been Deputy Chief for 13 years.
I've been at the Medical Examiner Department for 13 years. The last 3 were Deputy Chief.
And can you tell the jury a little bit about your education and training in forensic pathology?
Sure. I went to Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island for my undergraduate degree in Classics Latin. And then I stayed at Brown for medical school where I graduated with a Doctor of Medicine degree. Then I went to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia for my residency in pathology, anatomic pathology, and clinical pathology. After completing the residency, I came to Miami for fellowship to subspecialize in the subspecialty of forensic pathology.
And are you board certified in forensic pathology?
I am.
About how many autopsies, Dr. Mathis, have you performed over your career?
Around 2,000.
And have you previously come to court to testify as to the cause of death of an individual?
Yes.
About how many times have you done that?
Several dozen times. I usually come about 10 times a year. 10 times a year, times 12 years, 13 years I've been here.
And were you qualified as an expert on each of those occasions that you came to testify?
I have.
In what field were you qualified as an expert?
Forensic pathology.
Now, Dr. Mathis, can you tell the jury what exactly a medical examiner does?
Sure. A medical examiner is a forensic pathologist who works for the government generally. And we're charged with investigating deaths of individuals who died either under circumstances or because of who they are that the state has an interest in. So all non-natural deaths will go to a medical examiner, accidents, suicides, potential homicides, drug overdoses, inmates from the prison, those who die in police custody. And then when we investigate their deaths, we need to determine the cause of death, what caused them to die, and the manner of death, which is how we classify their death. We'll perform whatever investigations or studies we need to do, whether it's a record review, looking at their medical records, to performing a full autopsy, performing special dissections, having special tests run, studies done, also that we can determine what the cause and manner of death is.
And were you working as a medical examiner for Miami-Dade County on June 25th, 2022?
I was.
Are you the original medical examiner who did the actual autopsy on the victim, Pedro Jimenez?
Yes.
So I want to talk about your involvement in this case, Dr. Mathis. When did you perform that autopsy?
June 26, 2022.
Where did you perform it?
Our office, it's Medical Examiner Department. It's right across the street from Ryder Trauma at Jackson Medical Center next to Miami-Dade College Health Campus.
And when the body arrived for autopsy, what was its general condition?
He was in a fresh state. He had soiling from blood staining on his legs.
And did you observe any signs of medical intervention, such as bandages, anything like that on the body?
Yes, he had a tourniquet on his right thigh.
Now, can you walk us through the steps you take when performing an autopsy, Dr. Mathis?
Sure. So first, we capture the height and weight. We'll take a receiving photo of the individual. Then, if it's a suspected homicide, we'll get pictures of the hands. Then we'll collect fingernail clippings as evidence. The body will then be washed We'll take photographs, overall photographs of the individual, and then if there are any tattoos or injuries, we'll take photographs of those. Once the photographs have been taken, then the doctor will take any written notes about the external appearances of the body, of the tattoos, of the injuries, and then at that point, an internal examination, or what people colloquially will call the autopsy, will begin to be performed.
So you mentioned a lot of steps there.
Yes.
So I want to break that down. Can you explain to the members of the jury what an external exam is?
Sure. So external exam sounds just like that. We're taking note of the external features of the body. First is the routine, their body size, their body habitus, their height, their weight, their eye color, their hair color. And then we will, after all of the call it regular stuff has been documented, then we'll turn toward tattoos and scars. And then then we'll move into injuries. If there are any external evidence of injuries, then we'll document those down as well.
So you mentioned that you document tattoos. Did the victim in this case have a lot of tattoos?
He did.
And was one of those tattoos the name Daisy?
Yes.
Now, you also mentioned you start with external injuries, so I want to talk about those. What external injuries did you observe on the victim's body in this case?
Yes, so he had a through-and-through gunshot wound on his right thigh and a through-and-through gunshot wound on his left foot.
Now, Dr. Mathis, you mentioned a through-and-through gunshot wound through the right thigh and left foot.
Yes.
So I want to break that down. I want to start with the left foot. Your Honor, I now move into evidence what has been previously marked as States 1W by stipulation of the parties.
State Exhibit 1W marked for identification now becomes State Exhibit 20.
Now, Dr. Mathis, is this the victim's left foot?
It is.
Now, you mentioned that he had a through-and-through gunshot.
Yes. Can I come down? I don't have my glasses.
Can you show to the members of the jury where the entrance wound is on this foot?
It may be hard for you to see as well, but the entrance wound is on the bottom of the left heel.
And how do you know it's the entrance wound?
So, in general, entrance wounds are round. They can have a rim of abrasion. In this case, though, his skin is different than the rest of the skin on the body. Regular skin, a lot of it has hair. Foot skin, the plantar skin, the skin on the bottom of the foot, it's thicker, it's more elastic than the rest of the body. Anybody who's done a foot rub can attest to it or had to remove a splinter. So when a bullet goes through the skin of the sole of the foot, the plantar skin, the tissue is very elastic, so it will retract, allow the bullet to come in. So when you have an entrance wound on a bottom of the foot, you're going to see more of a slit-like appearance. In this case, you can even see a halo where the bullet tunneled in, but the skin retracts after it, and it's just the nature of the skin on the bottom of the foot. So that's an entrance wound.
Thanks, Dr. Mathis. And in this picture, where is the exit wound?
The exit wound is on the Achilles tendon region on the back of the heel.
How do you know that's the exit wound?
Exit wounds are irregular. Oftentimes you can take them and push them together, the edges together. You can see that this has a kind of slit-like irregularity to it, and that the pieces fit together like a puzzle.
And now, Dr. Mathis, looking at the entrance and exit wound, can you determine the path the bullet took when it entered the foot?
Yeah, so since this is the entrance wound, that's where it's entered. This is what we call a perforating wound. So it's entering through the sole of the foot, the left heel, and it is going through the soft tissue and coming out the back of the heel region by the Achilles tendon region.
Now, Dr. Mathis, you also mentioned that the foot is flat and it has tougher skin, is that right?
The sole of the foot, yes.
Would a person wearing a shoe, would that move the path of the bullet when it enters the person's foot?
Move the path of the bullet. So sometimes when you're wearing clothing or shoes, it can change the appearance of the entrance wound. It can add irregularity to it. It can also help us to confirm what we're seeing. So if you're looking at this or you're less experienced and you don't have a lot of experience looking at plantar wounds on the bottom of the foot, you can look at the clothing and you can, or the shoe, and you can interpret the directionality from the shoe or the clothing itself.
And what is this photo here?
That's a close-up of the exit wound on the back of the heel on the Achilles tendon region.
I'm sorry, it's an
Achilles tendon region, the back of the heel.
And how do we know that's the exit wound?
It has all the features of an exit wound. So you can see the skin kind of fits back together with a puzzle piece. If I push the edges together, it has an irregular linear. It's kind of linear, but it's irregular. That makes those features of an exit wound.
And what about this photo?
That is a close-up of the entrance wound on the bottom of the foot.
And how do we know that?
Because of the way it looks. So, like I said, normally an entrance wound is going to be round, but because of where the location is on the sole of the foot and the nature of the skin down there, entrance wounds on plantar surface can look linear. The bullet just kind of separates the tissue, comes in, and the tissue collapses behind it.
Now I want to go back to, you mentioned shoes, and that can change the shape or irregularity of a wound. Was the victim in this case wearing shoes, do you know?
Yes.
Did you receive those shoes?
I did.
What kind of shoes were they?
They're like a boot, casual boot.
Judge, I now move into evidence what has been previously marked as states 1X. By stipulation of the parties, Judge.
State Exhibit 1X marked for identification now becomes State Exhibit 21.
Permission to publish, Judge?
Yes.
Dr. Mathis, are these the shoes that you received from the victim, that were recovered from the victim's body?
Yes. They came with them.
And what are we looking at here with the white, where the white stick is pointing?
So there is a hole next to the white stick. This is the outer edge of the left heel region of the shoe. And then below it we have red discoloration, which looks like blood to me.
Before we head to break, we do have a quick programming note. A 3-year-old boy stabbed to death outside of a grocery store. His mother stabbed as she tried to save him. In a new episode of On the Record, Court TV's Cody Thomas takes you inside that courtroom, breaking down this heartbreaking trial of Bianca Ellis day by day. Watch On the Record, the toddler stabbing trial, now streaming at courttv.com under the Shows tab or on Court TV YouTube's page. We'll be right back with more after this quick break.
My 2 best friends were just murdered.
Join me for a Court TV true crime series where we take you from the crime scene to the courtroom.
Donna Adelson hates every piece of grass that Dave Martell ever walked on.
It's something that'll haunt all of us forever.
It always seemed like he was covering or deceiving.
This was a whole different level.
Victim to Verdict with Ted Rowlands. New episodes Saturday night, 8 Eastern and Pacific.
Only on Court TV.
Back Back to court in just a minute, but first, we do have an update out of Ohio where the fate of Bianca Ellis will soon be in the hands of a jury. Ellis is accused of fatally stabbing a 3-year-old boy and injuring his mother. This was during what is just an awful random attack, or at least what seems to be. This happened last year inside a grocery store parking lot. And right now, the jury is hearing from the defense's final witness, a forensic psychiatrist who testified earlier today that she believed Ellis did not know her actions were wrong at the time of the incident. Due to a court order, we are unable to air testimony until the day is over, but we'll get you into that courtroom as soon as we can and as soon as testimony ends there for the day. But for now, let's head back to Florida, where testimony is underway in this other trial we've been watching. It's called the Toxic Relationship Murder Trial. The defendant is Daisy Link. The 30-year-old is accused of fatally shooting her on-again, off-again boyfriend in the leg back in June of 2022. But the defense says Pedro Jimenez was unhinged and dangerous, and that Link had to shoot in self-defense. Let's get back into that courtroom. The medical examiner is testifying to some autopsy photos of the victim.
This is just a further out photograph, so you can see the entire shoe.
What's interesting about this picture, Dr. Mathis?
So this is the back of the shoe, and if you recall, the wound I kept referring to as on the Achilles tendon on the back of the foot, this correlates with it. This is where it came out from. So it came out of the skin, and then it came out of the shoe, creating this irregular defect here.
So that's where the exit wound came out of?
Yes.
And where was this, what part, was this the entrance or exit wound entry?
This is the entrance wound. You can see the fibers of the fabric or leather are pointing inward, and it's creating a defect. So that's consistent with the entrance wound from clothing.
Now, you also mentioned that in this case, the victim had a wound to the left foot and a wound to the right thigh.
That's correct.
I want to talk about the wound to the right thigh. Judge, I now move into evidence what has been previously marked as 1Y by stipulation of the parties.
Today, Exhibit 1Y, marked for identification, now becomes today Exhibit 22, Judge.
Now, Dr. Mathis, is this the wound on the right thigh?
Yes. So what you're looking at here is a victim lying on his belly on our autopsy table. So you're looking at the back of his lower extremities, the back of his leg. His buttock would be here, right above where the picture cuts off.
And is the wound to the right thigh, did it have both an entrance and exit wound?
It has both an entrance and an exit.
And this wound is the entrance?
Is the entrance.
How do we know that for the right thigh?
Because of the way it looks. Sorry. Because of the way it looks. We interpret gunshot wounds, entrance, exit, based on their morphology, the way they look. And this one, you can even see from this view, at a closer up, but even from this view, it's nice and it has a round this punched out appearance to it.
Now, what are we looking at now?
Now, this you're looking, he's lying on his back now. And up here above, that would be the groin region above, and I'm looking at from the top of the thighs down. And within the tattoo, there is a gunshot wound there.
Is this a better view of the front of the victim's thigh?
Yes.
And what exit wound is that?
That is the exit wound. That's on the front of the thigh, and that's the exit wound.
Listen.
Same thing, just a different orientation.
What about this picture?
So now we're back on the back of the thigh. This is an entrance wound. You can see it has a punched out appearance. You can see the yellow in the middle. That's the fat, the soft tissue underneath the skin. So that's missing. That's the gunshot wound. You can see it's got like this oval. It can be round, it can be oval, it can be elliptical, depending on the angle that they go in. Around the wound. And then that there is what we call abrasion, some scraping of the tissue around the edges of the wound. These are all features of an entrance wound.
Now, Dr. Mathis, for his right thigh, were you able to determine the path the bullet was taking?
Yes, so this is the entrance wound. It's on the back of the thigh, so it's going from back to front.
Is the way that the bullet entered through the back of his right thigh consistent with the victim facing his back to the person who shot him?
The back of the victim needs to be facing the barrel of the gun.
So yes.
Yes.
Would it be consistent if you were facing the person who shot him?
No, because the barrel of the gun has to be pointing toward the back of the thigh.
Now, Judge, I now move to evidence what has been previously marked as Stage 1Z by stipulation of the parties.
Stay Exhibit 1Z, marked for identification, now becomes Stay Exhibit 23, Judge.
Judge, permission to publish? Yes. Now, Dr. Mathis, what are we looking at here?
We're looking at the student's line flat on his back on the autopsy table, and I took plastic probes and ran them through, placed them through the pathways of the two gunshot wounds.
So this is the wound to the foot.
Correct. And now it kind of makes more sense when you saw the shoe and how it looked on him. Harder to appreciate when adjusting the hole, but with the probe, it makes it easier to visualize.
Now, Dr. Mathis, I want to take everything together, what you said. We spoke about the left foot, the path of the bullet. We spoke about the right thigh and the path of that. Judge, I now move into evidence what has been previously marked as 1K by stipulation of the parties.
Stay Exhibit 1K, marked for identification, now becomes Stay Exhibit 24, Judge.
Judge, permission for the witness and myself to stand over here? Now, Dr. Mathis, can you explain to the jury what this diagram is indicating?
Sure. So this diagram here in the middle is the notes I take during the autopsy. We call it the body diagram sheet, and that's where I'm marking down his hair color, our tattoos, and then I noted where the wounds were, what their size is.
And how did the bullet first enter the body?
How did the bullet first enter the body? So he has an entrance wound on the left foot. That's coming out the back of the left heel region, and he has an entrance wound on the right thigh in the back. That's coming out the front of the right thigh.
How is it?
Let's go ahead and bring in our guest for this hour to discuss. Joining us now from Denver, Colorado, criminal defense attorney Eric Mathis. Eric, great to see you. I've seen you all over the place talking about the Charlie Kirk situation, Sean Diddy Combs. So thank you for making some time to talk with us today as we watch this case and listening to the medical examiner on the stand. All right, well, that doesn't look so great for defense counsel here because the prosecutor has the medical examiner on the stand talking about the path of the bullets. So, Eric, what would you do as defense counsel here on cross-examination with the medical examiner?
Well, as defense, their defense is self-defense here, right? So they've got to establish that there was a reasonable fear of imminent bodily harm that the defendant had, and that's why she discharged the firearm. One point I would highlight is that, hey, this was one shot. It is not 5 shots. It's not 6 shots. It was one single shot. And even if the alleged victim did have his back to the defendant, a person could easily turn around, especially if things were getting heated, especially if things were escalated, especially if threats were made. And so there still is fodder for cross-examination, although that is a problematic fact for the defense.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric, what did you think? We had some arguments earlier outside the presence of the jury, and the defendant wanted, the statement kind of talking about saying it was forced. When she went and she talked with the police, there was coercion and force. What do you do with that when you're a defense counsel and your client is telling you, yeah, I said things, but they forced me to say that?
What you want to try to do on the defense side is show possibly the coercive nature of this interrogation and how it can influence a person's responses. If a person feels compelled, feels like that they couldn't make the choices that they wanted to make for themselves, and instead that the police were really driving the ship and sort of forcing her to do things, that can have an influence on what those responses are and the weight of those responses. A person could get nervous, they could misstate something, they could, in the moment, try to fabricate something. And while that's also problematic, it's not the same as someone being guilty of murder.
Yeah, good point, Eric. Okay, we're going to squeeze in a quick break, but don't go anywhere. We're coming right back with more of this case that we have been watching out of Florida. Back now to Miami, where Daisy Link is on trial for the killing of her on-again, off-again partner, Pedro Jimenez. Link is charged with second-degree murder after Jimenez was fatally shot back in 2022. Both sides agree that their relationship was toxic. Since then, the defendant got pregnant while in jail by another inmate, but the jury is not going to be hearing, or not expected to hear, anything about that, at least during this trial. So let's head back into the courtroom now. We are listening to some testimony. This is from the chief medical examiner. His name is Dr. Benjamin Mathis.
How is it possible that the way the bullet entered, how is it possible with that angle? How would the victim have had to have been standing for the bullet to enter the way it did?
From the bottom of the foot?
Yes.
So that's bottom of the foot. So to get an entrance from the bottom of the foot, the gun has to be under the foot. So if the foot is on the ground, it has to be, I guess, on the upper floor and coming through the ceiling, or the foot has to be in the air in order for it to get go in. So since that scenario doesn't really make sense, the left foot needs to be up in the air in order for it to be facing the barrel of the gun.
Could that be consistent with if the victim was going to try to run, that his foot was up? Would that be consistent?
Yes.
Now, once the bullet enters the left foot and exit, where does it go?
So then it comes out the back of the left foot.
And then where does it go?
Then it's going to continue in the same trajectory along a straight line until it hits something else.
And then can you just...
Or just drops to the ground.
And then for the thigh, can you talk about how when it left the foot and it enters the thigh, how that's possible?
So, yes. So the same bullet could cause both wounds. It can go from the outer edge of the left foot, the left heel, to the back of the left heel region. And then the foot's up in the air, it can go into the back of the right thigh and out the front. So it goes through the foot and then through the back of the thigh and out the front.
And you're indicating that the record reflects that the witness had his left foot up and his front was facing the judge.
Right, so your right leg has to be forward, your left foot is up, and you could create that pathway.
And your back has to be facing the person who's shooting.
Yes, at least the back of the foot, yes, because that's where it has to come inside.
Now, Dr. Mathis, looking at the wound tracks, is it possible that a single projectile did this?
Yes, in the way that I just described.
And okay, we're good with this. Now, I want to talk about the internal examination. Did you perform an internal examination?
I did.
Okay. And what internal damage did you observe as a result of the gunshot wounds?
So inside the body, his organs, those were all good. I had to do a special dissection on his right thigh to document the injuries going on within the soft tissue. And he had a lot of blood and bleeding in the muscles of his right thigh, in the region of that gunshot wound. And he had holes in his femoral artery and femoral vein.
You mentioned he had holes in his femoral artery and vein. Did the bullet strike or sever those major arteries?
Yes, the bullet struck those arteries.
And now, Dr. Mathis, based on your expertise and experience, would an injury to the femoral artery, such as a gunshot wound, cause rapid or severe blood loss to someone?
It will cause severe blood loss. The blood comes from the heart, is pumping. The femoral artery comes off after the aorta branches into the iliacs. The femoral artery is one of the branches that comes off the iliac artery, and it supplies blood flow to the rest of the leg. So it's a very important blood vessel, and it will bleed, and you will lose a lot of blood from it.
And are you able to estimate about how quickly a person can lose consciousness or die from such bleeding?
So when we're talking about a femoral artery, it will take longer than, say, if you have a hole in your aorta or a hole in your lung or a hole in your heart. It's a bit downstream, so it can take several minutes. And then there are things that can mitigate it. If you're applying pressure, or if for some reason the muscle tissue is compressed around the wound, anything that's going to apply pressure to that area can slow down the bleeding.
Now, you also mentioned that several things can mitigate that. Let's say, Dr. Mathis, that there was no mitigation. There was no covering or trying to prevent the blood loss. If pressure is not being applied correctly, how fast would the victim take to die from this type of wound?
It can still take several minutes.
And based on your knowledge, was that consistent with what happened to the victim in this case?
I don't think there was a long survivability period, but I wasn't aware of that at the time of the autopsy. For us, it didn't matter, but it will take. It's not going to be that you're shot and you suddenly collapse. There is a time period where it will take for the blood to come out of the body, reduce the blood volume, so that the heart no longer has enough blood to pump up to the brain to get it the oxygen it needs.
And how is it that the blood is going to come out the body? Is it going to come out rapidly? Is it going to splatter a lot?
Yes, so you have both an arterial bleed and a venous bleed. So the vein is returning blood from the bottom of the foot. That's a low pressure system. It will ooze, or it'll accumulate in the muscular tissue. The artery, on the other hand, each time the heart pumps, blood is going to be spurting out of that artery. If that artery has a clear path out the hole, the exit hole, then you will get blood coming out of that hole, and that's where you see, like in the movies, the arterial spread. If there's not a clear pathway from the hole in the artery because it's blocked by muscle or tissue, then it'll continue to spurt, but it'll come out. It may not come out as a spurt out of the hole when it leaks. It may accumulate in the tissues and then dribble out.
Now I want to talk about toxicology. Was a toxicology test performed on the victim?
Yes.
And what were the results of that test, Dr. Mathis?
I'm just referencing the toxicology report. So in him was detected ethanol, which is beverage alcohol like you'd find in vodka or tequila. He had cocaine. He had metabolites of cocaine, the breakdown products. And he had THC, which is the active ingredient in marijuana.
And how much cocaine was detected in his blood?
He had, according to the report, 0.274 milligrams per liter.
Would you say that's a lot of cocaine, Dr. Mathis, a little bit of cocaine?
It's a healthy amount of cocaine. Yes.
And now, based on your experience, Dr. Mathis, what is it that cocaine does to the body or blood?
So cocaine is a stimulant. So it causes your heart to increase. It will increase your blood pressure. It narrows the blood vessels. That's how it increases the blood pressure. And like I said, it makes your heart race. It keeps you. It's an upper.
Based on your exam, Dr. Mathis, did the cocaine contribute to the victim's death?
No.
Why do you say that?
because he's got a gunshot wound that went through his femoral artery and he's bleeding out, dying from hemorrhagic shock.
Did any of the substances that he had in his blood system contribute to his death?
No.
So I want to talk about the cause and manner of death. Based on your examination, were you able to determine the cause of death?
Yes.
What was it?
That was the gunshot wound of the right thigh.
So how long would it have been, Dr. Mathis, based on your training and experience, it would take someone to bleed out or die from that injury?
Like you said, it can take several minutes.
Were you able to determine the manner of death?
Yes.
What was the manner of death?
Homicide.
Moment to confer, Judge.
All right, learning more about what the victim here had in his system with the medical examiner on the stand. Let's squeeze in a quick break. We're coming right back.
I'm Vinny Politan. Welcome to Closing Arguments.
What's happening here?
It's unreal. Let me show you exactly what happened.
Closing Arguments with Vinny Politan. Tonight at 8/7 Central. Only on Court TV.
A wife accused of murdering her prominent attorney husband, and the defense involves blaming her own sons?
Victim to Verdict with Ted Rollins. New episode Saturday night, 8 Eastern and Pacific.
Only on Court TV.
Back now to Miami for more testimony in the murder trial for defendant Daisy Link. Prosecutors say that she murdered her on and off again partner, Pedro Jimenez, and father of 2 of her children back in June of 2022. But her defense is saying the victim was, quote, unhinged and out of control, and she had to shoot him to get away from him. Let's go back into the courtroom now. We are listening to the medical examiner.
Dr. Mathis, and I want to go back to the external injuries you observed.
Yes.
If the victim was running away, I'm doing this.
Yes.
He's running with his left foot up. If he's doing this, is that consistent with what the shot that you observed, the wounds you observed on his body?
If he's in a running position, yes. The left foot has to be in the air and the right foot has to be forward.
So if he's running away, that's consistent?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I want to talk about ricocheting. Is it possible that the person who shot the victim shot him to the ground and that it went through his left foot and out through his left thigh? Is that possible what you saw here?
I find that extremely unlikely. So when you have a ricochet, when you first fire the weapon, it has all the energy in it. That's why it can make characteristic appearances of gunshot wounds. In this case, the bullet not only went through the shoe, the boot, twice, went in and went out, went through the foot, went through the thigh, in, and came out. That takes a lot of energy. So ricochet is, one, not going to be able to do that, and 2, the wound on the back of the thigh would have had to have, if it managed to even get out of the left shoe, which I find very unlikely, that you would have a ricochet that actually can go through the shoe, go through the foot, come out the shoe. When it hits that right thigh, it's not going to have that nice oval wound that you saw. So I can't see this being a ricochet, no.
Now I want to talk about, again, the arteries that were damaged. Is a time delay in the time from the time that the victim was shot, if there was a time delay in calling 911 or having assistance, would that also likely contribute to his death?
So when you have a wound like that, those are devastating injuries that require immediate medical attention. The wound needs to the blood flow needs to be stopped. Basically, needs to put a tourniquet tight around the wound to stop the blood flow into the leg. And then, of course, you're on a clock because the leg's not getting the nutrients it needs, and you would have to amputate. But a femoral artery wound is a devastating injury. So yes, if you don't receive medical attention, you will die quicker.
So if there was a delay in calling 911 or getting assistance or putting a tourniquet on the victim, that's going to speed up the time he dies?
Yes.
Now I want to talk about the drugs in his system.
Yes.
I know you mentioned earlier that those didn't contribute to his death.
Correct.
Would you say, doctor, based on your training and experience, that the drugs slowed down the amount of time it took him to die?
So there are some people who would say, okay, cocaine is a stimulant. So a lot of times when people get shot, they get an adrenaline rush. They may not even feel that they were shot till they look down and they see that they are bleeding. That adrenaline rush, adrenaline is also a stimulant, also causes the heart to beat faster and the blood vessels to constrict, which will increase your pressure. So cocaine as a stimulant could, in fact, actually help the situation because it's causing the blood vessels to be more constricted than they ordinarily would be, which is going to increase his blood pressure, which could theoretically increase his survivability period. But you still have a big hole in your femoral artery, so.
Thank you. Want me to confer, Judge? Yes. No further questions, Judge.
Insufficient cross-examination.
Morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
Not to state the obvious, but just to be absolutely clear, we've got 2 entrance wounds and 2 exit wounds on this gentleman.
Correct.
But this is all from 1 bullet, 1 shot, correct?
It's consistent with that. So if the circumstances indicate that there's 1 bullet, 1 firing, this is the most reasonable way it happened.
There's nothing that you're aware of that would suggest to you or indicate to you that there was more than 1 shot in this particular instance, correct?
Right. Look, I have 2 through-and-through wounds. So could they have occurred through 2 separate shots? If that's what the scene and the circumstances supported, I'm not going to be able to refute you on that. But my understanding is if there's 1 shot, that there's 1 shot, 1 bullet fired, this is how it would occur.
So what we're talking about here...
Okay, let's go ahead and bring in our guest, criminal defense attorney Eric Mathis. All right, Eric, cross-examination getting started right away. He's saying, I'm not going to state the obvious here, but starts questioning him about that. You think that was a good strategy, good question by defense counsel there?
Well, I think it was necessary for defense to establish, hey, this was 1 shot. Like I said, the defendant didn't unload the whole clip into the guy. It was 1 single shot. Where he should go next is that it was a shot to the foot. It wasn't a shot to the head. It wasn't a shot to the chest. And that goes to her state of mind, which she was trying to do. On top of that, he needs to also touch on the substances in the alleged victim's body and how that could cause a person to become angry, belligerent, and a threat.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about that. Heard about the cocaine in his system, but then he was asked, well, was the cocaine his cause of death? No, he went on to say because he had gunshot wound. How did jurors view that? So you have a victim here, and he had cocaine in his system. He had alcohol in his system. How do you view that?
You know, it's tough because ideally you want, as a prosecutor, an alleged victim who is a saint, who is not engaging in any sort of underhanded or unsavory type conduct. But here, the jury might look at that and say, gosh, you know, is a guy has this cocktail of drugs in him, is that consistent with someone who could pose a threat in a domestic violence scenario? And it is. And so I think that is a critical piece of evidence, and I'll be interested to see ultimately how the jury views it.
Yeah, good point. Eric, thank you so much. Coming up, more testimony in the toxic relationship murder trial for the defendant in this case. You're taking a look at her right there. Her name is Daisy Link. We're coming right back. Hey, welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Kelly Craft. Happy Friday to all of you. We are going to be continuing to cover this case we have been watching out of Miami, Florida. Testimony is underway this afternoon in the toxic relationship murder trial. 30-year-old Daisy Link is accused of fatally shooting her on and off again boyfriend, Pedro Jimenez. This was back in June of 2022. Now, the couple share 2 children together, and by all accounts, they had an extremely toxic relationship. Now, defense says that Jimenez was particularly out of control that day, forcing Link to shoot in self-defense. Let's go into the courtroom now. The medical examiner is testifying.
So what we're talking about here is a bullet that went in through this man's heel, came out of another part of his foot, and then went into his leg and came out of another part of his leg. Is that correct?
Yes, the right thigh and then out the front of the right thigh.
How many autopsies have you done?
Probably it's 2,000.
As best you can recollect, have you ever observed or do you have any knowledge of a single gunshot wound taking that particular trajectory?
I've had single gunshot wounds go through both legs. I've had them go through the arm and the chest, through a foot and then the leg, a foot and then the opposite thigh. One does not come to mind.
You would agree that this is a highly unusual trajectory for one bullet, correct?
I wouldn't say unusual. It makes sense. I wouldn't say it's unusual. I would say it's not a pathway we encounter every day.
Now, when someone has an injury like this man had and aid is being rendered, am I correct that one of the first things you want to do is put a tourniquet on the person's leg?
Yes, you want to mitigate the blood loss. So that's going to be pressure, tourniquet, stop the blood flow from stop the blood flow above the level of the injury.
And that was done in this case, correct? That was administered?
He came in with a tourniquet on, so at some point one was placed on him.
Now, the amount of cocaine that this man had in his system, you testified earlier that it's not part of the cause of death, correct?
That's correct.
However, that amount, it is a potentially lethal amount, is it not?
Any amount of cocaine is technically potentially lethal.
But this amount, this isn't just any amount. This is a
goodly amount, yes.
Okay.
A goodly amount. It's not just a small amount. It's consistent with recreational use. It's not like somebody you see like a body packer or anything like that. But it's not just, sometimes we'll see people, regular cocaine users, and they're probably coming down and they have just a tiny little bit of cocaine coming along for the ride. He's using. Yes.
So this is, we're in Miami. There's cocaine in Miami. But this is not just, like you said, not a little bit. This is a rather significant amount of cocaine that this man took, right?
This is recreational use of cocaine. It's not, like I said, it's not the little bit we see with somebody that's coming down. They're in the active phase of using.
Now, am I correct that that when somebody's using cocaine and they use other substances, particularly alcohol, that increases the toxicity of cocaine, correct?
It can, yes.
Okay. That combination, cocaine and alcohol, it produces a metabolite called cocaethylene, correct?
That's correct.
And in your autopsy, you tested for cocaethylene, correct?
Yes.
And he had 0.150 milligrams per liter of cocaethylene in his blood, correct?
Yes.
And when looking at the alcohol, he had 0.108 blood alcohol level. Is that correct?
Yes, 0.108 in the ocular fluid, 0.107 in the blood.
Right. So if he had been operating a motor vehicle, he would have been driving under the influence.
Correct.
because the legal limit in this state is .08. Correct?
That's correct.
All right, so he had this very high amount of cocaine in his blood, along with this amount of alcohol in his blood, which would have been enough to trigger a DUI had he been driving.
Objection, evidence calls for legal conclusion. Overruled.
Yes.
And he also smoked some weed too, correct?
At some point, he used marijuana. I cannot tell you how he used it, and I cannot tell you when.
Now, doctor, you were asked about whether or not some of these substances delay or could affect how long it takes somebody to bleed out. Can you explain that a little bit more, please?
Yes, so just as I explained before, cocaine is a stimulant, and it, just like the adrenaline rush that will occur when somebody gets an injury, it will increase your blood pressure through constricting your arteries, and it will cause your heart to beat faster.
Now, when someone's shot, do you expect them to necessarily start bleeding out right away, or does it take a few moments before blood starts coming out of somebody's body? I mean, usually.
Oh, when they're shot, they'll start bleeding right away. You may not see it on the outside of the body, but trust me, they're bleeding somewhere. So they get shot in the chest. They are bleeding into whatever space is around them. So in the chest, you have a lot of space for the lungs to expand. They're going to bleed into the chest wall. You get shot in the leg, you're going to be bleeding into the muscles, the soft tissues there. Only when the body is in a position where the hole that leads to the outside is lined up with where the blood is will it come out. So oftentimes we'll get to a scene of murder. They've got a bunch of holes in their chest. There's not really that much blood out. When we start to move the body and we've tipped it, then blood will start coming out of the holes.
So it might take a little bit of time before you start seeing blood dripping and landing on the floor from somebody who's been shot.
Correct. It just depends how the hole lines up with where the blood is accumulating.
So if somebody's walking or running or in any type of movement, they get shot, but they're moving, you might not start to see a blood trail until they've taken a few steps, correct?
Correct.
Now, so you were asked about whether certain things are consistent with your findings. I want to give you a scenario, and you can tell me if it's consistent with what you found here. Okay?
Yep.
Right. So let's assume that we have somebody who is very high on cocaine and alcohol and THC. And that person is running around stalking somebody outside their home. Okay?
Yes.
That person is told to leave. They don't leave. At some point, there's a confrontation, and the person is asked again to leave. The person screams and says, "I want to die, I'm ready to die." And then they run towards a house with the intention of breaking into that house, which they have no right to be in. And a person fires a shot in that person's general direction for the sole purpose of getting that person to leave, which they have thus far refused to leave. Are you with me so far?
Yes.
Objection, evading the province of the jury.
He hasn't finished asking his questions. Let me hear the rest of the question.
Fires a gunshot for the purpose of getting that person to leave, which that person has refused to leave up until that point. Once that gunshot is fired, that person starts to leave. You would not expect that person to immediately bleed onto the ground and show where that person was standing at the time he was shot. Is that correct?
He could be bleeding at that time, or he could start to bleed later. I can't tell you one way or the other.
So if blood droplets are found, say, 15 steps away from a front door, give or take, 15 steps away from that front door. Would that, or could that be consistent with somebody running away from that front door after being shot?
So you have the front there shot. Are you telling me where the person was shot, or?
So the person's running towards the front door with the intent of breaking into this house, which they've been...
Objection, legal conclusion. Evading the province of the jury.
Overruled. If you can answer the hypothetical, you'll do so. If you can't, you can't.
Correct.
Go ahead, I didn't hear the end.
The person was told, leave. I don't want you here. You're not welcome here. Get out.
Okay.
I'm not getting out. You're going to have to kill me. Runs towards the door. Shot is fired for the purpose of getting that person to leave. Shot hits.
Let's go ahead and bring in our guest for this hour to discuss. Joining us now from Santa Fe, New Mexico, criminal defense attorney John Day. John, thank you for being with us. Happy Friday to you. Okay, John, how do you think this cross-examination is going? Defense counsel is really trying to get the medical examiner to talk about he had cocaine in his system, he had alcohol in his system, he was, acting erratic. What's your takeaway? How is the cross going?
Well, thanks for having me. I think the cross, the defense lawyer is doing what he has to do. I kind of like this witness, this medical examiner. He seems pretty unflappable. But what the defense attorney has to do is try to plant in at least 1, 2, 3 jurors' minds the idea that that this was backing up the self-defense claim, backing up the idea that there was no other choice, that this woman felt so cornered and so threatened that this was a reasonable response, even if in hindsight it doesn't look reasonable. So, the medical examiner, these guys, they testify so often, they're so good on the stand usually, and it's hard to get them to look like they don't know what they're talking about, they're not aware of this stuff. They're really good at this, and I like this guy in particular because he comes across as very approachable. I think jurors are going to relate to him. He's a scientist, but he doesn't talk like a scientist. And of course, all these jurors have seen all the CSI shows on TV, and they know that the scientific evidence is coming in. They're interested in it. This is not like a high school science class where they're bored, they're rolling their eyes. This is stuff that's relatable to them, especially in the context of what they've been hearing in this trial. So I think the defense lawyer is doing what he has to do. Whether it's going to get anything across to the jury remains to be seen.
And John, what about the fact that defense counsel was asking there and basically indicating, this isn't a shot, he didn't say these words, but basically was suggesting this wasn't a shot to the head, this wasn't a shot to the chest, talking about the path of the bullet here. And again, trying to go along with his theory that she did this in self-defense.
Yeah, it's significant. I mean, they want the jurors to think if this was some type of non-self-defense situation, why isn't there a shot to the mass of the chest or to the head or something else? I mean, it's consistent with their theory of self-defense in that the placement of the shot is so random, and it gives you the sense, at least they're going to argue in closing, that she was acting out of fear, she was acting out of feeling like she was going to get hurt, that she had some reason to respond the way she did, and it was reasonable. So, yeah, I mean, that goes to the point that it was self-defense. This was not a shot to the chest, shot to the stomach, shot to the head. This was something, in their view, that's consistent with her being really terrified and really scared.
Yeah, good point, John. Okay, more cross-examination is going to continue after a short break. We'll be back.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, the biggest moments from today's testimony in the toddler stab murder trial. We dive deeper as this case nears its dramatic finish.
Closing Arguments, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV. Next week.
We're digging deeper into the biggest cases across the country. Join us for all the latest developments with what's trending in true crime.
Opening statements with Julie Grant. Mornings at 8/7 Central on Court TV.
Back to court in Miami in just a moment. But first, here's a quick look at some of the other cases that we are tracking here at Court TV. In Ohio, the fate of Bianca Ellis will soon be in the hands of a jury. The defense is currently wrapping up the final witness. Due to a court order, we are unable to show you that testimony until court is done for the day. But we will take you there as soon as we are able to later on today. We are also in Wisconsin, where the state's case continues for a teen accused of killing a young woman who got caught in his gun's crossfire while taking out the garbage. And we are standing by in Florida, where later this hour, a judge will decide whether or not to uphold the jury's recommendation to sentence Jose Soto Escalera to death for the murders of his mistress and their unborn child. We will keep you updated on all these trials throughout the day here on Court TV, but for now, let's head back to Miami. This is the toxic relationship murder trial for Daisy Link. Right now, the jury is hearing from the medical examiner. Let's go back in.
This man is whacked out of his mind on cocaine, alcohol, marijuana. He's been asked to leave. He refuses to leave. He's in a heightened state, very aggressive. Screams, I'm ready to die. I want to die. He's not leaving. He's not welcome in the house. Doesn't have permission to be in the house. Has no license or has no authority, no right to be in that house. He's going to that house, running towards that door. Shots fired for the purpose of getting him to leave, which he has already refused multiple times to do so. Shot goes into his body. Once that happens, he's not going to the house anymore. He's running away. He takes about 15 steps running away from the house, give or take 15 steps before blood starts to drip out and hit the ground. Is that consistent with what you've seen here, with the wounds in this case? Could that have happened?
So you're asking could he have been shot while still inside the house before leaving?
Didn't get inside the house. Okay. He was running towards the front door, is shot, and now the shot is what caused him to abandon his attempt to go into that house.
Okay.
So now he's running away from the house.
Okay. And
he makes it about 15 steps, give or take, 15 steps away from the house before you start seeing a trail of blood on the ground.
Okay.
Is that consistent with this? Does that make sense?
It can happen that way, yes. Okay. Like I said, he could start bleeding immediately or it could take several steps to begin to start bleeding.
So the scenario that I just laid out for you, this is not a wildly impossible or unlikely or ridiculous scenario. This is consistent with what you've seen, correct?
Yeah, it's one way it could happen. I can't tell you for sure that he didn't start bleeding for 15 steps. I also can't tell you for sure, he would have started bleeding immediately.
Right. And nobody knows for sure except for the people who would have been there, right?
Correct.
Thank you, Doctor.
New York.
Dr. Mathis, you were asked on cross-examination about if a tourniquet was placed on the victim, it would help slow down the bleeding.
If placed tight enough, yes.
You don't know when a tourniquet was placed on the victim in this case, do you?
No.
So if there was a delay in when the tourniquet was placed, would that slow down the bleeding or cause him not to die?
The delay in the tourniquet, he'll be bleeding the entire time until a tourniquet is put on, tightly. So anytime up until that tourniquet is put on, the pressure's not being applied, the wound's going to be bleeding. You may not be able to see it on the outside, but it'll be bleeding on the inside.
So if a person waits 10 minutes to call 911 and the officers then take some time to get there after, would that contribute to the victim's death as well?
Yes.
Now you were asked about the blood coming out, and they're coming out of holes, and it may not bleed at that time, or it may. If a person is running away, would the blood start coming out?
It should, because now you're moving the leg, you're advancing it forward, you're causing manipulation, just like I told you. When we start flipping the body, the blood starts pouring out of the hole. So as you're moving, the blood you should start leaving a blood trail.
You're also asked about hypothetical, so I want to pose one to you. If a person goes outside, they're on the steps, they pick up a gun, they point it out at the victim sees the gun in fear for his life, turns around and runs away, and that person shoots, is that consistent with what we have here today?
Can you repeat your question?
Yes. A person picks up a gun, aims it at the victim in fear for his life, turns around, runs away, and the person shoots the victim. Is that consistent with what we have here today?
Yes, it could happen that way.
Thank you, Judge. No further questions.
Judge, we agree cross on that question.
Yeah.
Judge, I would ask that we go sidebar.
I haven't heard anything yet, so not at this time. Go ahead.
You were asked about a victim who's in fear for his life running away, right?
Yes.
That's the question she just asked. Would you expect somebody who's in fear of their life to say, "I'm ready to die"?
Objection, Judge. Speculation, making comments of the jury.
Can you answer that question?
I can't.
Okay, so that's
Thank you.
Can you please step down?
All right, thank you.